Now what we're going to do is take a report from Will Coleshill, which concerns the Paloma Shemirani inquest, and he has been at that inquest over the past week, and he's going to present his findings now in recorded video, which deal exclusively with the sort of medical malpractice and medical ethics side of it, as well as possible breach of their own editorial guidelines by the BBC.
Hello, this is Will Coleshill reporting for UK Column. I'm here down at Kent and Medway Coroner's Court, where I'm reporting on the fifth day of the inquest into the death of Paloma Shemirani. Now, the court case is not done yet, but we have heard a significant amount of evidence. This case, of course, has been propelled into the spotlight because of the mother of Paloma, Kate Shemirani, who is, of course, a famous freedom activist. Considering the BBC pieces in terms of an article, a panorama episode, and also a podcast series by Mariana Spring, where they were framed to allege, especially in terms of accusations by Paloma's brother Gabriel, that is Kate's son, that Kate Shemirani had killed her own daughter. We've heard a significant amount of evidence from a number of doctors, and the key focus for much of this case so far has actually been whether Paloma had the competence to be able to make her own decisions, informed to choose alternative therapies rather than the mainstream conventional medical therapies. A lot of the original few days covered the inciting incident when Paloma first found a mediastinal mass in her chest and went to the hospital, where a number of things happened which seemed to undermine any trust Paloma would have had in conventional medicine. Now, Paloma obviously did have a background in alternative therapy, but there seemed to have been a number of alleged errors and malpractices that, at least in Paloma's views, according to her statements, have led her to distrust the NHS and conventional medicine and fear them and feel like she was being bullied. These include being denied a wristband and being administered drugs without consent, and then being pressured into signing a consent form for chemotherapy by doctors. Now, obviously, this is alleged at the moment, but backing this up was Paloma's own statements to the High Court. Indeed, it's quite a complex but very interesting case, because this is one of the few cases where we actually have the statements, very categorically, of the person in question into whom this inquest is being conducted. Paloma, despite this original incident happening in late 2023, around the end of the year, died in summer 2024, while she was currently in a battle with her brother over her medical autonomy and her capacity. During this time, she was spending some of the last of her money in order to fight her brother in court to maintain her medical autonomy and stay with her mother, pursuing alternative therapies. What's quite interesting is, despite multiple hours of coverage, an article, a piece by Panorama, and a 5-part podcast series, the BBC chose to omit Paloma's signed statements from their coverage. Now, why do I say that they chose to omit this coverage? It was quite interesting. The other day I was here and I spoke to one of the BBC employees who told me they were aware when they made them. Now, I was given an email. I have then submitted a line of questions to one of the producers at the BBC's BBC email address, and I've also forwarded this over to the BBC press office in order to have these questions answered. As of yet, at the time of recording, I've received no response to these questions, which do seem like the BBC has acted in a biased nature and breached their editorial guidelines as well as the BBC Charter. During this case, we've heard from a number of doctors who were in contact with Paloma who have confirmed her competence. Not only the initial doctor against whom much is alleged, Dr. Mohan, who confirmed Paloma's competence, but also her psychologist. And we saw many hours, I believe it may have been 5 or 6 hours of questioning, who again completely asserted Paloma's competence. We saw questioning of a hyperbaric oxygen therapist, and we also saw questioning of her GP. Now, all 4 of these doctors confirmed Paloma was competent, intelligent, and able to make her own decisions about her medical treatment. And that's what a lot of this comes down to. Whether Paloma had the right to choose her medical treatment and choose alternative therapy over conventional therapy, or whether, because she chose that alternative treatment, it is highly likely she was being coerced. There have been some very interesting actions by the coroner presiding over the case. We've seen the coroner mute Kate a number of times. We've seen fireworks. We've seen mother and son essentially interrogating each other. One significant factor is we've actually seen some malicious action within this case. For one, I had a malicious allegation against me that I was somehow filming in the court when it would have been effectively impossible for me to do so, considering I was sat right at the front of the press room in front of a camera, live link to the main courtroom. Somehow I was meant to have filmed there. Obviously, this is a spurious allegation, but clearly someone was trying to prevent alternative media coverage of the court case. I have reported this as a malicious accusation to the coroner, and this has been noted and accepted, but I'm waiting to see what comes of it, because clearly there is a huge amount of mainstream media interest here, but very little by the alternative media. A lot of what has happened so far has been determined by Paloma's competence, investigating it, and whether she was able to make her own decision. However, in the coming weeks, when we'll be back here again at this court, we're going to look at the days leading up to Paloma's death. We've already heard from a doctor who was there with Paloma at the end when she died. However, we're going to hear from the ambulance crew, and we're going to look at the administration of adrenaline, which Kate Shemirani is alleging killed Paloma by overloading her as she collapsed on that fateful day on July the 19th, 2024. We're yet to hear from the ambulance crews. Kate gave a very, very emotional but very strong statement condemning their action and the amount of time that they spent waiting around before going down to the hospital to try and treat her. And that is likely what these last few days is going to focus upon, on the actual events directly leading up to her death rather than her competence. However, what I think we've seen from these 5 days in court is a refutation of what the BBC has put out, at least in terms of the evidence that has been seen so far. The evidence overwhelmingly points to the competence of Paloma. So I believe there's a question to ask as to the BBC coverage, as to Mariana Spring, and as to whether anybody else who chose to take a natural treatment and happened to die would ever have this sort of coverage, or whether there are further agendas at play. Thank you. I'm Will Colesill, reporting for UK Column News from Kent.
Will Colesill there, and very many thanks to him for a really comprehensive report. And I'm sure you will have all formed your own view as to whether there are further agendas at play. But it seems completely remarkable that the censorship that we experience so much in what we do is actually playing out even in the coroner's court in real time. Completely extraordinary. But well done him for challenging the BBC.